Picture this. You're sitting in a meeting room, surrounded by colleagues and superiors. Out of nowhere, someone throws a comment at you, half joking, half cutting, but sharp enough to sting. Everyone turns their heads, waiting for your reaction. Most people would fire back with a defense, a clever remark, or at least a protest to prove they're not weak. But you don't. You remain silent. No anger, no rebuttal, no twitch of irritation. And suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. Your silence begins to weigh heavier than any response. The one who mocked you starts to feel uneasy, exposed, even foolish. If you've ever experienced this, you know silence is not weakness. In fact, silence can be the most devastating form of power. The problem is, very few of us are taught how to use silence. In the modern world, especially for men navigating midlife, balancing careers, families, and social pressures, we are constantly told to speak up, to defend ourselves, to clap back. But Stoicism, a philosophy that has survived thousands of years, whispers a radically different truth. Silence is not surrender. Silence kills disrespect. In the next 40 minutes, we will explore how Stoic wisdom transforms silence into a weapon of strength. Not the shallow tricks you might find in self-help blogs or corporate workshops, but timeless principles lived and tested by Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. These men weren't strangers to insult, injustice, or humiliation. They were emperors, advisors, and exiles, men who faced ridicule, betrayal, and political chaos. Yet they discovered that silence, when chosen deliberately, cuts deeper than any spoken retaliation. Think about our era. A single careless comment can spark outrage across social media. A dismissive glance from a colleague can gnaw at you for days. A harsh word from someone you love can echo in your head long after the argument ends. In times like these, silence is not passive. It is an active choice. The choice to control yourself rather than be controlled by others. Here's what I want you to carry with you as we begin. Silence is not avoidance. Silence is command. When you master it, silence preserves your peace and turns the weight of disrespect back on the one who delivered it. So why does silence hold such power? And how can we make sure our silence isn't confused with weakness, but radiates strength and composure? That's where Stoicism offers us a roadmap. In this journey, we'll move through 5 Stoic questions that have guided wise men for centuries. Each question will take us deeper, from filtering what matters, to transforming how we respond, to finally seeing life itself in a clearer light. By the end, you'll see why silence is not just the absence of words. It's a deliberate act, a statement without speech, a reflection of inner mastery. And more importantly, you'll understand why your silence, when rooted in Stoic discipline, unsettles those who disrespect you far more than any comeback ever could. This is StoicCraft. Not quick hacks, not shallow motivational quotes. Here, we draw from the depth of Stoic philosophy and translate it into the realities of modern life. If you're looking to stand firmer, live freer, and rise above the noise of petty insults, stay with me, because in the minutes ahead, you'll discover why silence, the very thing people mistake for weakness, can become your sharpest blade. To understand why silence matters so much, we first need to look at the world we live in. The modern age is louder than any time in history. Voices are everywhere. Meetings, family dinners, social media feeds, news headlines. Everyone seems to have an opinion, and everyone wants to be heard. But in all this noise, respect has become fragile. Disrespect, on the other hand, is effortless. One sarcastic remark, one mocking laugh, one dismissive glance. It doesn't take much for someone to make you feel smaller than you are. For men and women in midlife, this weight is even heavier. You spent years building a career, raising a family, or maintaining relationships. Yet you still find yourself tested daily. At work, your ideas may be brushed aside by someone with less experience but a louder voice. In friendships, you might feel taken for granted, invited when convenient, ignored when not. Even within family life, disagreements can quickly turn personal. A child slamming a door, a partner throwing a sharp word in frustration. And online, a stranger can insult you with a few keystrokes, never knowing the ripple it causes in your mind. The pain of disrespect is real. It cuts deeper than we admit, especially as we age. Why? Because respect is currency. It's what keeps your position stable in the office, your authority intact at home, your dignity alive in the eyes of others. When someone chips away at that, the instinct is to fight back, to prove them wrong, to re-establish your standing with words. But here's the trap. The moment you react in anger, you hand them control. This is where Stoicism offers a path that feels almost paradoxical. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That truth is timeless. In the office, you can't control if a colleague mocks you. On social media, you can't stop someone from commenting cruelly. Even in your home, you can't dictate every word spoken to you. But you can decide what those words do inside you. Think of it like this. Disrespect is an arrow shot at you. You can either catch it and drive it deeper into your own chest by reacting, or you can let it fall harmlessly at your feet. Your silence is what makes the arrow useless. It doesn't mean you didn't notice. It means you refuse to give it the power it craved. The modern world constantly tests this. Social media thrives on reaction. Every platform is designed to push your buttons, provoke outrage, bait you into responding. Politicians, celebrities, influencers, many survive on stirring anger. In your workplace, sometimes the colleague who disrespects you doesn't even care if they're right. They just want to see you lose composure. And in personal relationships, hurtful words are often less about truth and more about someone else's stress, insecurity, or fatigue. But here's where silence becomes radical. When you don't give them what they want, when you don't flinch, when you let the disrespect hang in the air unanswered, something shifts. The attention turns back on them. Their words echo awkwardly. Their smirk fades, and the room begins to realize who actually holds the higher ground. This doesn't mean silence is easy. The hardest part is fighting the ego. Your pride screams, "Don't let them talk to you like that." Your inner voice insists, "If I don't respond, people will think I'm weak." But Stoicism trains you to see pride for what it is, a fragile thing that grows stronger only when fed by other people's opinions. Seneca once said, "It is not that we are given a short life, but that we make it short by wasting time." How much time do we waste in arguments that prove nothing? Except that we couldn't control our own tempers. So ask yourself, how many hours, days, even years of your life have been lost to grudges, petty arguments, and words that never should have mattered? How much peace have you sacrificed trying to prove a point? In today's society, where disrespect has become casual, silence is not retreat, it is rebellion. It is choosing not to be dragged into the mud of meaningless conflict. It is staking a claim to your inner calm in a world that profits from chaos. And this brings us to the core of what we'll explore next. To truly master the art of silence, you must learn to filter, question, and test your own responses. That's why Stoicism gives us guiding questions, timeless prompts that sharpen your perspective and keep you anchored. These aren't just abstract ideas, they are practical tools. The first of them will challenge you to separate what truly affects you from what does not. Because not every insult deserves a reaction. Not every arrow deserves to pierce your skin. And that's where we begin, with the first Stoic question. The first Stoic question sounds deceptively simple. Does this really affect me? Yet this one question can save you countless hours of stress, frustration, and wasted energy. Imagine walking down the street and someone shouts something rude at you from across the road. At that moment, your pride flares up. You want to shout back, but pause, ask yourself, does this truly affect me? If a stranger you'll never see again calls you a name, what exactly changes in your life? Nothing. The insult is like smoke, visible for a moment, gone the next. But if you let it under your skin, it can poison the rest of your day. This was one of Epictetus' central teachings. He reminded his students that we cannot control what others say or do, only our response. He said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The insult is external. Your reaction is internal. The only way disrespect truly affects you is if you give it permission to. Now think about how this plays out in the modern world. You post something online. Hours later, you find a comment dripping with sarcasm or cruelty. You feel attacked. Your fingers itch to reply, to defend yourself, to put that person in their place. But let's be honest. Who are they? A stranger with an avatar. Are you the name you'll forget by next week? Their comment affects your peace only if you believe their words have weight. And here's the irony. By responding, you make them relevant. Your silence, in contrast, denies them that power. But it's not just online. In the workplace, maybe you give a presentation and someone makes a dismissive remark. Your pride is bruised. You replay it in your head the rest of the day. But pause and ask, does this really affect me? Unless their comment directly changes your position, your paycheck, or your responsibilities, it's just noise. Yet how many of us let such moments ruin our mood, our evening, even our sleep? Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." That may sound harsh, but it's liberating. If disrespect doesn't physically touch you, change your circumstances, or alter your character, it only has power if you allow it into your mind. Think of disrespect like a stone thrown into a river. The stone sinks, the water ripples, and then the surface returns to calm. But if you are like a bucket of still water, one stone disturbs everything, leaving you clouded and muddy. Which would you rather be, the river that swallows stones effortlessly, or the fragile bucket that loses all peace when disturbed? Let's bring this closer to daily life. How many times have you carried someone's words with you longer than they did? They may have forgotten the insult 5 minutes later, but you carried it into your commute, your dinner, even your dreams. Who, then, was actually punished, not them? You punished yourself. This is where the first Stoic question becomes so powerful. The next time someone disrespects you, pause before reacting. Ask, does this truly affect me? Does this comment change my health, my income, my family, my integrity? 99 times out of 100, the answer will be no. And if the answer is no, then the wisest choice is silence. Because silence in that moment is not weakness, it's clarity. Now, does this mean we should ignore everything? No, there will be times when disrespect crosses into territory that does affect you, when it endangers your job, undermines your authority as a parent, or creates real harm to your reputation. In those rare cases, action is necessary. But even then, Stoicism teaches us to respond with composure, not rage. You may need to address it directly, but you do it calmly, with control, never handing them the satisfaction of seeing you rattled. One way to practice this in modern life is through self-reflection. At the end of each day, review the moments that disturbed you. Write them down. Then, For each one, ask yourself, did this really affect me? Did this event truly damage my well-being? Or did I give it more weight than it deserved? Over time, you will notice how many of your frustrations were smoke, not fire. You will start letting go quicker. Let's use a story to bring this alive. A manager once told me about a meeting where a junior employee mocked his idea with a joke. The manager felt a surge of anger. He wanted to put the employee in his place, but he paused. He asked himself, does this really affect me? The truth was, it didn't. His authority in the company wasn't shaken. His position was secure. The joke said more about the employee's immaturity than about his leadership. So he stayed silent. The meeting continued, and afterward, several colleagues privately told him they respected how he handled it. His silence became proof of his strength, not weakness. We live in a culture that confuses reaction with relevance. If you react, you show you care. If you stay silent, people assume you don't. But here's the Stoic twist. When you react less, you matter more. Because people notice the weight of your silence. They realize you are not easily shaken, not easily provoked. And in a noisy world, the calm one becomes the most powerful dot. So let this question echo in your mind. Does this really affect me? Write it on a card. Keep it on your desk. Use it when your pride itches to respond. Because every time you choose silence when the answer is no, you free yourself from unnecessary chains. The first step to turning silence into power is recognizing how little truly deserves a reaction. Once you see that, you begin to master yourself. And the one who masters himself cannot be mastered by others. The second Stoic question builds directly on the first. Once you've asked, does this really affect me? And filtered out the noise, the next challenge is this. Does my reaction make me better? It's one thing to dismiss what doesn't matter. But what about the moments that do? What about the disrespect that stings from someone close to you? A partner, a colleague, a friend. In those cases, silence might not be enough. You may need to respond. But here's where Stoicism gives us a higher standard. Your response should never lower you. It should elevate you. Think about how most people respond when disrespected. They lash out, fueled by ego. They raise their voices, slam doors, send scathing emails. And for a moment, it feels good. But afterward, there's regret. You replay the scene, realizing your outburst didn't make you look stronger. It made you look weaker, smaller, controlled by someone else's words. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." That's another way of saying, don't rush to react. Instead, pause and ask yourself, if I choose this reaction, will it make me wiser? Will it make me more respected? Will it make me more at peace? If the answer is no, silence or restraint is the higher path. This is not about suppressing your emotions. Stoicism doesn't tell us to bury our feelings. It tells us to master them, to channel them into actions that align with virtue. In Stoic thought, virtue is the highest good. Wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Any reaction that strips you of those virtues is beneath you. Any reaction that strengthens them is worthy. Let's bring this into modern life. Imagine you're at work. A colleague publicly questions your competence in front of others. Your first instinct is to defend yourself sharply, maybe even throw a jab back. But before speaking, ask, does this reaction make me better? If your words will only escalate conflict, if they'll make you look defensive, then no, they don't make you better. But if you can respond calmly, with facts, or sometimes with composed silence, you display mastery. You show others that you're steady, unshaken, and in control. That earns far more respect than a clever insult ever could. Now, think about relationships at home. Arguments with a partner can be the sharpest wounds. A hurtful comment cuts deeper when it comes from someone you love. The temptation is to fire back, to prove you're not the one in the wrong. But what does that reaction build? Does it make you a better husband, wife, or parent? Or does it only pour fuel on the fire? Sometimes the most powerful response in family life is to step back, breathe, and return later with clarity. Because your goal isn't to win the argument, it's to preserve the relationship. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to measure his actions by whether they aligned with the person he wanted to be. In Meditations, he wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's the essence of this question. If your reaction isn't right, if it doesn't bring you closer to the person you aspire to be, then hold it. Of course, this is easier said than done. Our pride hates the idea of restraint. Society tells us that strength means hitting back harder, but Stoicism flips this idea on its head. True strength isn't about overpowering others, it's about overpowering yourself. The one who cannot control their tongue is always weaker than the one who can. Let me give you a story. A senior executive once told me about a board meeting where he was openly challenged by another leader. The challenger raised his voice, questioning his judgment. Everyone in the room braced for a heated exchange. But instead of firing back, the executive paused. He asked himself silently, "Will my reaction make me better?" He realized that yelling would only drag him down, so he calmly acknowledged the concern, outlined his reasoning with clarity, and moved on. Later, several board members told him they admired his composure. His restraint didn't just protect his dignity, it elevated it. Contrast that with another story. A father who lost his temper with his teenage son. The boy had been disrespectful, and the father, feeling cornered, shouted harsh words he didn't mean. The son stormed off. In that moment, the father's reaction didn't make him better. It made him smaller in his own eyes. Later, he admitted that silence, or at least measured patience, would have built more respect than anger ever could. That's why this Stoic question is so powerful. It doesn't just protect you in the moment. It shapes the kind of person you're becoming. Every reaction is a vote for who you want to be. Each time you choose patience over anger, clarity over chaos, silence over noise, you cast a vote for the stronger version of yourself. And here's the challenge. In the heat of the moment, you won't always succeed. You'll slip. You'll react in ways that don't make you better. But Stoicism isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Each failure is a lesson. Each mistake is a chance to reflect and prepare for the next test. So here's a practice. The next time you feel provoked, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, if I act on this impulse, will it make me wiser? Will it leave me proud of myself tomorrow? Will it align with the person I want to be? If the answer is no, let silence speak for you. If the answer is yes, then respond. But respond from strength, not ego. In a world that glorifies quick comebacks and witty retorts, the man or woman who pauses, who weighs their response, who chooses dignity over drama, becomes unforgettable. They radiate a quiet power that others can feel, and often, that's enough to disarm disrespect entirely. So carry this question with you. Does this reaction make me better? Because at the end of the day, the only real measure of strength is not how others see you, but how you see yourself. And if your reaction leaves you smaller in your own eyes, it was never worth it. By now, you've already seen how silence can protect your peace and preserve your dignity. But silence isn't just about what you avoid. It's also about what you communicate. That leads us to the third Stoic question. What am I proving through my silence? Because make no mistake, silence always says something. The only question is whether it speaks for you or against you. In our culture, silence is often misunderstood. People assume it means you have no answer, no strength, no confidence. But Stoicism flips this assumption on its head. True silence, the kind born of self-mastery, is not emptiness. It is presence. It sends a message without words, and in many cases, that message is louder than anything you could have said. Marcus Aurelius captured this spirit when he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. If someone disrespects you with arrogance, cruelty, or pettiness, and you respond in kind, you prove that they succeeded in dragging you down to their level. But when you choose silence, you prove the opposite, that their behavior has no power to corrupt your character. Your silence becomes proof of your superiority, not in ego, but in self-control. Consider the example of Cato the Younger, a Roman statesman famous for his uncompromising integrity. In the Senate, he was often mocked, insulted, even shouted down. Yet Cato rarely responded with anger. He would sit silently, calm and composed, letting the chaos around him speak for itself. Historians note that his silence made his opponents look smaller, more childish. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence was enough to reveal the weakness of those. Now think about how this applies today. In the workplace, silence can prove confidence. When a colleague tries to bait you with sarcasm, silence proves you don't need to defend yourself. You already know your worth. In personal relationships, silence can prove patience. When your partner lashes out in frustration, your silence shows that you're strong enough not to add fuel to the fire. On social media, silence can prove wisdom. When someone tries to drag you into an online brawl, your silence shows that you value your time and peace more than their provocation. But here's the key. Silence is not about retreat. It's about deliberate presence. There's a difference between sulking in silence and standing in silence. Sulking is withdrawal, an attempt to hide. Stoic silence is strength, a conscious act that proves you are bigger than the moment. Ask yourself, when you remain silent, what are you proving? Are you proving that you're afraid? Or are you proving that you're unshaken? The difference lies in intention. Stoic silence is never passive. It is chosen, it is active, it is, in its own way, a statement. Let's use a story to bring this alive. A lawyer once told me about a courtroom battle where his opponent made personal attacks, trying to rattle him. Instead of responding, the lawyer sat in silence, calm, even slightly smiling. The judge eventually cut the opponent off, clearly annoyed by the theatrics. Afterward, the lawyer's client said, "You didn't say a word, but you won the room." That's the power of silence. It can prove composure in a way no words ever could. Silence also proves something about your priorities. When you choose not to engage, you prove that your energy is too valuable to waste. You prove that your attention belongs to higher things. Seneca once wrote, "Life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future." In other words, your time is precious. By staying silent, you prove you won't let someone else's disrespect steal it from you. There's also a spiritual dimension here. Silence proves alignment with something greater than ego. Every time you stay silent, you prove that you've chosen peace over pride, discipline over impulse, wisdom over vanity. And in doing so, you create a presence others can feel. People notice when you are unshaken. They may not say it, but they sense it. Your silence lingers in the room long after words fade. But let's be clear, silence doesn't mean indifference. There are moments when you must speak, when justice or truth demands a voice. Stoicism doesn't tell us to mute ourselves forever. It tells us to be intentional, to speak when words will improve the situation and to stay silent when they will not. The philosopher Zeno, founder of Stoicism, once said, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." In other words, silence is safer than careless speech. So here's the practical exercise. The next time you're provoked, pause and ask, if I stay silent, what will my silence prove? If it proves fear, then speak with courage. But if it proves composure, mastery, or wisdom, then silence is the stronger response. Let's take a modern scenario. A heated meeting at work. One person dominates the conversation, dismisses your points, and challenges you. Everyone looks at you, waiting for your counterattack. You remain silent, listening calmly, maybe taking notes. The silence grows heavy. The others in the room begin to notice the aggressor's arrogance. You didn't have to say a word. Your silence proved you were in control, not them. Later, when you do speak, your words carry more weight precisely because you haven't wasted them. Or imagine a family argument. Your teenager snaps at you, throwing out a disrespectful comment. You want to lash back to assert authority, but you pause, you stay silent, letting the words hang in the air. The child expects a fight but finds none. Later, when emotions cool, your silence proves that you value teaching through patience, not punishment. It proves you're strong enough to guide, not just to dominate. And in the digital world, silence may be the most radical proof of all. The internet thrives on outrage. People bait you to reply, to fight, to feed the fire. But when you stay silent, you prove you're not a puppet of algorithms or strangers. You prove your life is lived offline, not dictated by online battles. That proof, though invisible, is priceless. So let's return to the question. What am I proving through my silence? Ask it each time you're tested, because silence always proves something, either your weakness or your strength. Stoic silence proves the latter. By mastering this, you transform silence from absence into presence, from retreat into power. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing others to see themselves. And often, that reflection is more haunting than any words you could deliver. By the time you've reached this question, silence is no longer just about defending your peace. It becomes about perspective. The fourth Stoic question asks, if I were in their position, would I be ashamed of myself? This question does something extraordinary. It shifts the focus from you to them. Instead of obsessing over the sting of disrespect, you step into the mind of the person who disrespected you. And often, when you do this honestly, the insult begins to look very different. Stoicism isn't just about toughness. It's also about empathy. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They're like this because they cannot tell good from evil. He wasn't excusing their behavior, but he was preparing his mind to understand it. People hurt others because they themselves are hurting, ignorant, or trapped in their own weakness. So, when someone disrespects you, ask, if I were them, would I feel proud, or would I feel ashamed? More often than not, the answer is shame, because cruelty usually comes from insecurity. Disrespect often comes from fear. People lash out because they don't know how to deal with their own pain. Think about the workplace. Imagine a colleague undermines you in front of others. Step into their shoes. Why would they do that? Perhaps they feel threatened by your competence. Perhaps they fear being overlooked. If you were in their position, insecure, anxious, desperate to prove yourself, would you be proud of such behavior? Or would you later feel ashamed? Most likely ashamed. And recognizing that gives you power, because you realize their disrespect is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their struggle. Or picture a family argument. Your partner, tired and stressed, snaps at you unfairly. If you imagine being in their shoes, exhausted, under pressure, carrying worries you may not even know. Would you be proud of lashing out? Or would you look back with regret? Suddenly, silence becomes more than self-control. It becomes compassion. By choosing not to escalate, you give them the space to return to themselves without guilt piled on guilt. This doesn't mean you excuse everything. Stoicism isn't naive. It doesn't ask you to tolerate abuse or accept toxic behavior. It asks you to see clearly, to recognize that many insults are less about you and more about the other person's inner turmoil. When you understand that, you can meet disrespect with dignity, not vengeance. Seneca once wrote, "We are all wicked. What one man blames in another, each will find in his own heart." That's the essence of this question. The flaws we see in others live in us too. And when we realize this, we soften. We stop taking insults so personally. Because if we were in their position, with their struggles, we might not behave much differently. Let's use a story. A teacher once told me about a student who constantly disrupted class, marking her in front of others. At first, she felt humiliated, even angry. But then she asked herself, if I were in his position, would I be proud? She realized the student's home life was broken, filled with conflict and neglect. His mockery wasn't strength, it was a cry for attention. By recognizing that, she stopped reacting defensively. She responded with patience, and slowly, the student's behavior changed. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was compassion born of perspective. In the modern world, this perspective is radical. We are taught to defend ourselves at all costs, to demand respect instantly. But Stoicism suggests a deeper approach and a stand before you react. Because once you see the shame behind disrespect, you no longer feel bound to retaliate. You realize silence is sometimes the most generous response you can give. And here's the paradox. This kind of silence often disarms people more than anger ever could. When someone expects you to fight back, but instead you respond with calm, or even empathy, they're left facing themselves. They see their behavior more clearly. And often, that is punishment enough. Think of a time when you lost your temper, said something cruel, and later regretted it. Now imagine the other person had responded not with anger, but with calm sense. Wouldn't that have made your shame even heavier? That's what this question teaches. Your silence can be a mirror, forcing others to see what they might prefer to ignore. Practically speaking, you can use this question in daily life as a pause button. The next time someone insults you, don't react immediately. Instead, step into their shoes. Ask, if I were them, would I be proud right now, or ashamed? That shift in perspective pulls you out of ego and into wisdom. It reminds you that disrespect says more about the giver than the receiver. Of course, this doesn't mean you let people walk over you. Sometimes you must set boundaries. Sometimes you must speak. But even then, the perspective matters. When you respond, you can do it from a place of strength, not wounded pride. You can set boundaries calmly, without venom, because you already know the insult wasn't truly about you. This is why Stoicism is not just a philosophy of self-protection. It's also a philosophy of humanity. It trains you not only to guard your peace, but also to see others more clearly. And that vision, the ability to understand the weakness behind the disrespect, frees you. So let this question echo in your mind. If I were in their position, would I be ashamed of myself? Because the moment you see that most disrespect comes from places of shame, you stop carrying it as your burden. You leave it where it belongs, with them. And here lies the true paradox. When your silence is born from empathy, it not only protects you, but sometimes heals the other person too. You show them, without words, a better way to be. And in that, silence becomes not just power, but wisdom, compassion, and leadership. When we talk about empathy and silence, it can sound abstract, almost idealistic. It's easy to nod along when reading Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. But what happens in the heat of the moment? When someone in the office cuts you down? When your partner throws a sharp remark at the end of a long day? When your teenager slams the door and spits out words you never thought you'd hear? That's when philosophy either lives or dies. That's when the question, if I were in their position, would I be ashamed of myself, becomes more than theory. It becomes a practice. The first step in bringing this question into practice is simple. Give yourself a pause. Neuroscientists today tell us what the Stoics already intuited, that emotions rise like a wave, crest, and then fall if we don't fuel them. If you can pause for even a minute before reacting, the fire will begin to burn itself out. Imagine someone hurls an insult at you. Instead of striking back, you breathe. You steady your eyes. You feel your heart beat slow. In that pause, you create space. And in that space, empathy has a chance to enter. You begin to see them not as a monster, but as a human being cracking under their own weight. Of course, silence isn't always about doing nothing. It can also be the strongest way of doing something. When a colleague undermines you publicly, your silence proves more than 100 words ever could. People in the room notice the contrast between their agitation and your composure. Later, when you do speak, calmly, briefly, with facts, your words carry weight precisely because you didn't waste them earlier. Silence gave them power, and beneath it all, you know the truth. If you were in that colleague's shoes, driven by insecurity and fear, you would likely feel ashamed. That recognition allows you to respond with dignity rather than anger. The same principle applies in the home. Think of a partner who lashes out after a long, exhausting day. Their words may cut deep. But if you ask the Stoic question, if I were in their position, would I be ashamed? The whole picture changes. You realize their disrespect is born not of contempt, but of fatigue, of pressure, of unspoken worries. In that moment, silence becomes compassion. You don't escalate. You don't return fire. You hold the line, not out of weakness, but out of strength. And later, when the storm has passed, they will often look back and feel their own chi more clearly than if you had shouted it into their face. But empathy is not indulgence. There are times when silence must end. The Stoics were not naive. Marcus Aurelius himself ruled an empire. He knew that discipline and justice sometimes require words, even action. The difference lies in intention. You can speak without venom. You can set boundaries without rage. You can confront without cruelty. The key is that when you finally act, it comes not from ego but from clarity. You already understand the weakness behind their disrespect, so you don't carry it as your own burden. You return it, calmly, to where it belongs. The test of this practice isn't in lofty philosophy, but in daily debriefs. At the end of a long day, ask yourself, when someone disrespected me, did I pause? Did I try, even briefly, to imagine their position? Did my silence prove strength or fear? Did my words, when I chose them, come from clarity or from wounded pride? These small reflections are what build the muscle of Stoic empathy. Progress doesn't come all at once. It comes from these repeated rehearsals of the mind. And perhaps the most powerful perspective shift comes when you zoom out. Marcus Aurelius often practiced what he called the view from above, imagining himself and his troubles as tiny compared to the vastness of the world. Try it. Next time someone disrespects you, picture both of you as specks in a city of millions. Then pull back further. The continent, the planet, the stars. From that height, ask yourself, will this insult matter tomorrow? Will it matter in a year? If you were them, would you feel proud of your words echoing across such a vast universe? The answer is almost always no, and in that recognition, silence feels not only possible, but natural. So remember, silence rooted in empathy is not passive. It is a conscious choice, a deliberate act of moral clarity. By asking, if I were in their position, would I be ashamed of myself? You drain the venom from insults, keep your own dignity intact, and sometimes, without a word, you help the other person see themselves more clearly. It is not about surrender, it is about mastery. Mastery of yourself, mastery of the moment, mastery of the story you're writing with your life. There's a reason the Stoics often carried reminders of death. They called it memento mori. Remember that you will die. To some, this sounds morbid, but to the Stoics, it was freeing. Why? Because once you realize that life is fragile and temporary, so much of what once felt urgent suddenly feels small. And that perspective brings us to the fifth and final Stoic question, the one that cuts deeper than all the others. If today were my last day, would this reaction matter? When disrespect comes, our instinct is to fight for pride, to protect our reputation, to prove we are not weak. But zoom out. Imagine for a moment that tonight is the end of your story. Would you want your final hours to be spent trading insults, typing angry replies online, or shouting across a room? Would you want the last thing your child remembers of you to be your voice raised in rage? Or would you rather those moments be filled with dignity, calm, and presence? Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in Meditations, said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being dramatic. He was reminding himself of the only certainty in life, its end. And from that vantage point, so many of our reactions shrink to nothing. That colleague's sarcasm, it doesn't matter. That stranger's insult online, irrelevant. That family member's sharp tongue, painful. Yes, but not worth poisoning your final day. This question forces you to strip everything down to essentials. If today is your last day, then what truly matters? Loving your family, living in alignment with your values, holding onto your integrity. Everything else, the disrespect, the petty arguments, the small humiliations, dissolves into dust. And the beauty is, you don't need to actually be on your deathbed to practice this perspective. You can live it daily, and in doing so, you raise the quality of every day you're given. Think of how differently you would respond if you truly believed today was the end. That angry email you were about to send, you would delete it. That sarcastic comeback you were forming in your head, you would swallow it. That lingering resentment you've carried for months, you would let it go. Because on your last day, peace is worth more than victory, dignity more than dominance, love more than pride. Now let's bring this into real life. A father once told me about a moment with his teenage daughter. She had been rude, dismissive, even cruel in her words. His first instinct was to lash back, to assert his authority. But then he paused and asked himself, if today were my last day, would this matter? Would I want my daughter's final memory of me to be anger? The answer was obvious. He stayed silent. Later, when things cooled, he spoke gently, and the conversation shifted. His silence, born from this question, preserved not just peace in the moment, but the memory his daughter would carry if he were gone tomorrow. This question also reshapes how we view conflict in the workplace. Suppose you're in a meeting and someone undermines you publicly. Your pride screams for a sharp rebuttal. But then you ask, if this were my last day, would this exchange matter? If you knew you would not walk into this office tomorrow, would you really want your last words to be defensive, angry, or bitter? Or would you rather leave behind a final impression of composure? Suddenly the insult feels smaller. Your silence, or your calm words, become your parting gift. A final demonstration of the person you chose to be, even online, where disrespect often feels relentless. This question changes everything. When someone provokes you with a comment, ask, "If today were my last day, would I waste my final minutes in an argument with a stranger I'll never meet?" The answer is always no, and in that recognition, you close the laptop, step away, and return to what matters: your loved ones, your passions, your inner peace. The Stoics knew that remembering death makes us better at living. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." This is not about despair. It's about clarity. Every insult, every disrespect, every provocation is put into proper scale when measured against the horizon of death. Most of it is dust, and realizing that gives you freedom. This fifth question is the pinnacle of escalation. The earlier questions train your mind step by step, to filter, to improve, to prove strength, to see others with empathy. But this last question shatters illusions entirely. It reminds you that time is the most precious thing you own. You cannot afford to waste it on petty reactions. Your silence, when rooted in this awareness, becomes unshakable. No one can bait you, because nothing they say can take away the limited hours you have left. Imagine walking through your day with this mindset. A driver cuts you off in traffic. You ask, "If today were my last day, would yelling matter?" The answer is no. You stay calm. Your child interrupts you rudely. You ask, "If today were my last day, would anger matter?" No. You respond with patience. A colleague takes credit for your idea. Painful, yes, but again, ask the question, does it matter in the scale of a life? Usually not. And when you see that clearly, you reclaim your peace. Of course, there will be moments when action is required. If today were truly your last day, you might choose to speak, but not to defend your ego. You would speak to protect someone, to show love, to honor your values. Your words would come from a higher place, not from pride. That's the difference Stoicism makes. It doesn't silence you forever. It sharpens you so that when you do speak, you speak with meaning. So let this question become your compass. If today were my last day, would this reaction matter? Carry it with you into every meeting, every conversation, every argument. Let it echo when you feel your blood rising, when your pride aches to respond. Because in that moment of pause, you will see clearly. You will see that most of what once provoked you does not deserve even a fraction of your final day. And here is the paradox. When you live this way, when you treat every day as if it could be your last, you not only protect your peace, you also gain respect. People feel the weight of your composure. They notice that you do not waste your time or your dignity in petty battles. They begin to sense what the Stoics already knew, that death is not a reason to despair, but a reason to live wisely. So ask yourself right now, if today were your last, how would you want to spend it? In anger, in noise, in petty disputes, or in calm, in clarity, in love? That choice is yours every single day. And the more often you choose silence over reaction, the more often you choose dignity over ego, the richer your days will be. Because here's the final truth. Your silence after disrespect is not just killing their arrogance. It's also saving your soul. We've walked through 5 questions, each one a lens, each one a shield, each one a reminder that silence is not surrender but strategy. Let's pause and gather them in our hands. First, you asked yourself, does this really affect me? That question stripped away the noise. It showed you that most insults are smoke, not fire. Then came the second. Does this reaction make me better? A test of character, because strength is not measured in how loud you shout, but in how well your actions align with who you want to become. The third was about presence. What am I proving through my silence? A reminder that silence itself speaks volumes. It can prove confidence, dignity, and control in ways words never could. The fourth brought empathy into play. If I were in their position, would I be ashamed of myself? That shift of perspective drained the poison from insults and revealed that most disrespect is born from insecurity, not truth. And finally, the question that towers above them all. If today were my last day, would this reaction matter? That one shattered illusions. It put every insult in its rightful place, small, fleeting, irrelevant compared to the finite treasure of your time together. These 5 questions form more than a defense against disrespect. They are philosophy for living. They remind you that your peace is yours to guard, that your dignity does not depend on anyone else's recognition, and that silence, when chosen deliberately, is one of the most powerful forces in human interaction. Think about the paradox you now understand. In a noisy world, silence is louder than shouting. In a world obsessed with reaction, restraint is the ultimate rebellion. In a society where everyone wants to prove they are right, the one who does not need to prove anything at all becomes unforgettable. But let's be clear, practicing this isn't easy. There will be moments when your pride gets the better of you, when anger slips through, when you answer words with words and regret it later. That's human. The Stoics themselves admitted their failures. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not as polished essays, but as reminders to himself, daily corrections to bring him back on track. You are not asked to be perfect. You are asked to practice. Every pause, every silence, every time you hold your dignity instead of throwing it away, that is progress. And here's the gift. As you practice, people will notice. They may not always say it, but they will feel it. They will see that you are not easily shaken. They will respect your composure. Some may even fear it, because your silence forces them to face themselves. And slowly, without trying, you begin to change the atmosphere around you. Your silence becomes a mirror, a shield, and a sword, all at once. So, what will you do with this? That's the real question. Will you carry these 5 Stoic questions into your next argument, your next meeting, your next family conflict? Will you pause, breathe, and let silence speak for you? Because the truth is, life will test you. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And when it does, you'll have a choice to react as you always have, or to practice something deeper. If you stayed with me this far, you already know what choice will serve you better. The Stoics have handed us the tools. The rest is on us. This is StoicCraft. Here, we don't chase empty motivation or shallow tricks. We build wisdom that lasts, wisdom that works in the real world. If you found value in these lessons, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who needs it, and keep coming back. Because this is just one path among many we'll walk together. Paths that will help you master yourself, outgrow your pain, and live with unshakable dignity. And as you step back into your life, carry this final thought: silence is not absence. It is presence. It is the sound of a person who knows their worth so deeply that no insult can touch it. And if you can live from that place, calm, steady, and grounded, then your silence after disrespect will not only kill the arrogance of others, it will save the best parts of yourself.